Welcome back to the Bootleg Corner. It is movie review hours once again, and this time we are going to be looking at the latest and biggest movie series out right now. No other than Netflix's live-action adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Prior to this movie's release, there was palpable excitement and anticipation for one of the most legendary animated series coming to the big screen. Night Shyamalan's attempt in 2011 had resulted in a much derided and despised The Last Airbender movie that failed to capture any semblance of the magic and beauty we saw in the animated series. To that end, the announcement of a new live-action adaptation on Netflix that would take the form of a series was welcomed immensely, even though some of us still had apprehension regarding the translation of certain aspects of the animation to a live action. The movie was announced as a series to properly capture the storyline that Shyamalan had tried to cram into a 2-hour movie, and up until then, everything looked to be on the right path. However, in the coming months to Avatar's second live-action debut, we began hearing troubling news about changes to the plot and general storyline. No one understood why this was happening or the justification for it. Matter of fact, the more I heard about this movie, the more apprehensive I got. Why change a working formula that showed more depth and justified character development? Then I hear that the original writers had left the studio sometime during the early production of the series, and at this point my bullshit meter was already blaring in the high extremes. Down to watching this movie, got the first 2 episodes to start with, and barely halfway through the movie I was just shaking my head. The movie was just unreal, and I do not mean that in a good way. When I talk about movies, my first barometer for judgment is the believability test. It doesn't matter what the plot is or who the actors are. The first thing that always comes to my mind is the believability test. Does the movie look serious? Do the actors communicate confidence and control of the screen? Yes or no? By their words, mannerisms and actions, you would know if they fit on screen or not. This movie lacked intention and a certain tone of seriousness to convince me, the viewer, that whatever was happening on my screen was indeed real. They looked like actors playing roles and not like people living their reality. Tried as they did for the costume, visuals and certain arrangements, which they got done admirably, they could not deflect from the main course of the movie, which seemed lacking in intensity or compactness. There are too many gaps in this movie left exposed and glaring to the audience. Dialogue was too cliche and had no smoothness to it. The conversation was uncomfortable, unconvincing and unsuitable for live action. The tone and delivery of the dialogue sounded like it was written for an animation rather than a live action movie. Look, some things are meant to be the way they are, and that is perfectly okay. Not everything needs to be a live action movie. Animation even allows for a wider range of movement and emotions, which would be impractical to capture in live action. As a side note, I would have preferred it if HBO were to acquire the rights to some of its adaptations, because they have shown remarkable competence in translating fantasy stories to the big screen. Netflix and Disney are merely playing around in the mud, afraid to try for the big leagues, hiding the safe and secure units, trotting out remakes or live-action adaptations of animated series because they know that they have a pre-existing fan base for that. This movie lacked the realism of real-life conversation and mannerisms and just tried to infuse the animated sequences with real-life characters, and that does not work in the least bit. The scene with the Kyoshi warriors was one sore point. The face paint looked very uncomfortable and unconvincing, and I think that they should have tried to go with face masks painted in the Kyoshi warrior colors, thus adding mystery and mystique to the soldier behind the mask. The Avatar's first meeting with Zuko was orchestrated so bizarrely that it sticks out sorely in my head. At multiple points in this movie, all I could do was laugh, even though nothing was remotely funny. Every time they zoom out of the picture for an action sequence that keeps the characters far from each other, you get a good result. The moment they go into close combat, you see the gaps and holes that cannot and will not be filled no matter what they do. The fight scenes lack inventiveness, believability again, and intensity. Come on, the bending is a significant part of the story, which they managed to get right for this movie after Shyamalan's butchering in 2011, but past that, it was entirely anticlimactic. I mean, why do so little with so much. Like this Twitter user said, rather than live action adaptations, why not animated series of live action movies? Because I'm quite sure they will not fumble the bag in such major ways as this. Imagine stories that are super successful on screen getting translated to animated form where they can explore the divert plus lines that could be developed from these IPs. And I think there's a Game of Thrones animated series coming out this year, and that just goes to show that there are things that can be done with this series in animated form rather than live action. All this Avatar adaptation did for me was to rekindle my desire to see the original animated movie again, to wash the sour taste off my mouth. I mean, this does not in the least way qualify for me. Even if I hadn't seen the original animation, you could tell barely a few minutes into this movie that something or several things were off. If this isn't enough, I keep hearing foreign news from the production camps. I mean, look at this for example. He says he doesn't know he was filming for the Last Airbender and thought it was for James Cameron's Avatar. Normally, this wouldn't be a big deal, but with the way things turned out, it can't just be swept under the rug. So at the end of the day, the big question once again is why? Why do this when you can do other stuff? Why ruin a foundational childhood memory for this quick crash grab? Why make a movie as big as this without injecting the required level of believability needed? The list of whys could go on and on the longer you watch this movie, but as for me, after episode 2, I have had enough. I am not ready or anxious to see a familiar story wrecked by a studio's deliberate incompetence. Whatever remains to be seen in the remaining 6 episodes is not for me, because at this point, my watch has ended. This isn't a totally bad movie. It has and will have its bright spots along the way, but for what the animated series were, this barely compares. Like this user said, certain things and features can only be done in animation form, and translating that to live action will require a reimagining of the scripts for better context. But for me, I cannot and will not watch this. It's a middling movie at best and a heavily funded caricature at worst. 8 episodes was all it took to cram a large amount of material from the animated series into one live action movie series. I hope this serves as a warning to other creators to see what happens to their creations when greed takes over passion. You can never really say no to the big corporations. After all, the creators deserve to be paid for their works. But the ringing rhetoric should be, is it worth it? There is a One Piece live action movie series already produced and currently streaming, and latest news out right now is that Naruto has a live action movie in the works. So get ready to see one of your favorite franchises get butchered in Hollywood. So you should look out for that. But as for me, I will not be there. My rating for the Avatar ranks around a 3 to 4 over 10. The only thing I found impressive in this movie were the graphics, visuals, costumes, and setting. Aside that, I couldn't go on and tapped out by episode 2. This is still the Bootleg Corner. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Check out our other content. Don't forget to subscribe. Keep it locked in, and I'll be back.